Hi everyone and welcome to Both Sides Book Club. Today we're going to be discussing If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. Catie.
So If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha was one of the books that we had in our votes in July, and it came in as third pretty much. You all voted for this one pretty highly. A little bit about the book is, instead of sort of giving you a story breakdown, I think this book's probably easier to explain in the sense that it evolves around four main characters and each of their stories navigating a very modern setting in Korea in Seoul. For any of you that don't know much about Korea in the beauty world, is they have extremely high expectations on themselves and beauty standards in Korea. And the story follows four girls and loosely a fifth girl navigating those worlds. So basically the four girls live in a officetel, which is a apartment block in Korea where an officetel is kind of like an apartment block, but also can be rented out for office spaces. And
very compact, I think.
Yeah, very, very compact.
Very compact.
And they're two different sets of housemates that live across from each other. And it's about their story of sisterhood and, as I said, travel, navigating through this world of extreme beauty standards. So I really enjoyed this book because, first off, it gave me a perspective that I hadn't ever had on Korea before. I think, and now that I've read it, I think, gosh, have I been living under a rock to not really know about these beauty standards?
Totally. I have to say that when I read it, I thought that it was actually futuristic. I actually did not know that it was set in modern Korea. I thought, well, no, it's a futuristic take on what might be in some kind of alternative world. So when we did the research and I realized that no, this actually takes place. These are the standards under which people live. Then I found that quite extraordinary.
So you might be wondering, when we say these high beauty standards, you might be wondering what, for those of you that haven't read the book or you don't know much about Korea in that world, these standards are that plastic surgery and face augmentation is
commonplace.
So common that it's not even thought about. I think from what I've researched is Korea is actually the number one country in the world with the highest amount of plastic surgeries. Plastic surgery capital of the world.
I was reading that a survey that the BBC did when they were making a program about plastic surgery in Korea, and there's actually lots out there in the TV world if you're interested in finding out more about it. But anyway, that there was an estimate that between 30 and 50% of all women in their 20s in South Korea have had plastic surgery of some degree or another.
And I think so when we talk about plastic surgery, I think in a Western world, the things that will come to mind, well, for me, is, America's the biggest capital for liposuction. I think about breast implants. I think about, lip fillers. I mean, every second, we live close to the Gold Coast, and every second person on the Gold Coast has had lip fillers.
But from kind of like our perspective, then, you tend to think more about those things like injectables and cosmetic surgery, more as anti-aging things rather than trying to completely change the way that you look.
Whereas in Korea, at first thought, it seems super extremist, is that the way that your face is actually determines your future. And I know that sounds, from a Western point of view, really, really extreme, but actually it's reality and it's the truth in Korea. they have this world where, you know, depending on how beautiful you are, it helps you to be able to pay for your grocery shops. It helps you to be able to save for a house. It helps you to be able to get ahead in the world.
Yeah.
And some of these surgeries that they have are, instead of having, if you were born with quite a broad jaw, is what's probably one of the most common ones is to bring your jaw into a more narrow setting.
Sort of pointed, heart-shaped.
Yeah. Also, another really common one is having your eyelids changed so that you end up having a double crease. The point behind that is to make their eyes seem bigger and more desirable. You know, the broadening of the nose, skin to be immaculate and glowing, same with hair. It's just a very, very different world. And
one thing that I found also really, really interesting is that whilst all this plastic surgery is going on, Korea is actually quite a conservative society, and largely there's a large Confucian influence there. So it's actually in order to conform, not to stand out.
Yes.
So it's not, so all of this is not going on to say, look at me, look at me, look at me.
No, it's the opposite.
It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
To kind of adhere to some sort of universal
beauty standard.
Beauty standard,
Yeah.
so that in fact you don't stand out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's this big push, particularly, I mean, men are not, you know, guys are getting plastic surgery too,
totally.
as well. It's not just women. But with the women, there's this desire to be sort of in this top percentage of, you know, of the most beautiful beautiful women. And it is, Frances loosely touches on it as well with K-pop, which is Korean pop stars, which is this whole another subcategory of this plastic surgery beauty world, is that, the universally beautiful people are the pop stars, the Korean pop stars. Yeah. So they are trying to adhere to those, to look like, to
those sort of standards.
Yeah, exactly. So as I touched on before, this book follows 4 different characters. 2 of them is Catie and Sujin, and I found their relationship really, really interesting. So Catie works in this this thing called a room salon, which in the Western world, if you imagine a very bougie strip club and then take away
the stripping
and add more class, where the focus is on having the top 10% of the most beautiful women in Korea serving and entertaining men through pouring liquor for them. That is what that's what this sort of establishment is. And so she works there, and even that alone I found really, really, really interesting, and is an example of how much they value beauty. So rather than in the Western world where it's, you know, sexualizing women and getting them to strip, and it's almost the opposite. These women are very conservatively dressed.
Yeah.
And these men are, you know, paying them just to be entertained by them. And Sujin's relationship, she wants to be like Catie. So it kind of opens up with her saying, if I had your face, like I could do your life so much better, because she just sees this world that Catie's living in where she's getting paid extremely well. In the room salon, she's
been given gifts of
luxurious
expensive designer handbags.
You know,
I mean, how many handbags can one girl?
Yeah, I know.
But she sells them.
I know. Yeah. But you know, this world of excess, and sees Catie as, you know, doing really, really well in life. But on the flip side, from Catie's point of view, you can see all the different levels of abuse that she goes through.
Yeah.
From men, and
but also from the woman,
owner.
the owner who runs the salon. I mean, I guess, you know, the parallels are there with prostitution in that, you know, the owner of the bar is almost a pimp in terms of that the girls owe her money. So, you know, it's kind of like a no-win situation that regardless of how much money Catie manages to earn, she's always got to be earning more because this debt is just increasing all of the time.
Yeah,
and they're fined, you know, if she doesn't please a customer or a particular customer doesn't come back, then, you know, or she's late or she says the wrong thing, then there are all these fines incurred. So, you know, it's almost a form of servitude.
In a way. And I feel like from the outside, you just wonder, you can understand from Sujin's point of view how Catie has gotten ahead. But on the other point of view, you go, well, I feel like Cutie's just running on this treadmill, this like, you know, not being able to get anywhere. Because on one hand, she is extremely beautiful. She's getting paid very well. But on the other hand, at what cost? So she has to drink herself silly every single time, every single night she works. She has to drink herself until she passes out, which takes a huge toll on her body. And then she has to go through this extreme beauty routine to be able to get her skin and herself looking fresh and beautiful again for the next night. And then, of course, you know, as we know from drinking and lack of sleep, that's one of the biggest causes for aging. So then, of course, she's also got to have more surgeries, more Botox, more, you know, just more.
And I think I think that that's portrayed really, really well. You know, that from the beginning of the book, we see her as this epitome of beauty. Obviously, she has also had extreme plastic surgery. I mean, I think...
Which she talks quite openly about.
Oh, totally. So she is, you know, being held as the epitome of success. And as you said, Sujin aspires to be just like her. But throughout the course of the book, you actually realise what the cost is. The cost is to her. And, you know, and you can see that she's just in this sort of downward spiral.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that I really needed to wrap my head around is just that the fact that it is just such a different world with beauty standards and that not to pass judgment on that at all. And I think when you read Frances's story, how it's split into the storyline, you know, with lots of books, it actually follows a bit of a overall story. Whereas in this book, Frances kind of like splices up each of their lives.
It's kind of like it's a slice of life. So basically, you know, the chapters are broken up from various characters' viewpoints, but there isn't any particular beginning or end in the story. It's just a looking at them over a period of time.
Yeah. So I think that actually aids in you to be able to really understand the pressures in which these girls have every day to maintain these you know, these looks that they're aspiring to have. And I think it makes you understand a little bit better about, well, you know, in a Western world, we have different pressures, and that their pressures are no different to our pressures. It's just...
Well, they are different. I mean, they are
different, but they're also much the same. They're just a different degree of them. I think the other relationship that are really, really cool is Ada and Miho. Miho, sorry.
Yeah.
Ada and Miho. How did you find their relationships compared with Catie and Sujin?
How did I find their relationship? And I think the relationships between all of the girls was quite unusual. Obviously, you had three of the girls that had been connected through their schools. Yeah. So Ada and Sujin had been best friends since forever. And Miho had also been at the same orphanage as Sujin, and then met Ada at school. So you had those three girls that did have a relationship that went way back, but they were very, very, very different. Miho obviously went to the United States and studied and came back, and I kind of found her an interesting character. I mean, she was a little bit more aloof. You kind of had the impression that she was in a bit of a sort of a...
She was a bit lost.
A bit lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas sort of Sujin and Ada were very, very close. And...
Very sisterly.
Very, very sisterly.
Yeah.
And Cutie kind of held herself, not that she thought of herself as being better than the others, but I think the others sort of all looked up to her a little bit, because they saw on the face of it that she was seemingly the most successful out of all of them. And I think that they, you know, whilst they all wanted to get on in the world, they had sort of slightly different aspirations. But underneath that, then, you know, there was very much a sense that they were there to support one another, and also that, you know, that they all had such a tremendous uphill struggle. You know, their lives were really, or are really, quite difficult as single women.
Yeah, I think another way that Frances pays tribute to the fact that it is modern Korea is also the fact that, as you said before, that with the orphanage, is that these women have left their families and they're living in an officetel, which in traditional Korean culture is actually not very common. In Korean culture, it's very common for children to be living with their families.
Multiple generations living together.
Or at least up until they're married, if not, you know, as you said, multiple generational. So I think that also plays a huge role in the sense of creating this modern day Korea, this push for industry and the working woman, and lots of most of these characters don't want to get married or you know, have children. And I think that there's another character in the story that we haven't spoken much about, is Wana. Yeah. And with Wana, she's only a little bit older than these girls.
Yeah, so Wana is married and she lives in the same officetel building.
And she's pregnant.
And she's pregnant. She and she really is struggling with a husband who's, quite frankly, a waste of time. But knowing that being able to rear this child is going to be extremely difficult financially.
And so I think it was important that Wana was a part of the story, because it showed how quickly the fast-paced generational movement is in Korea. And, you know, she's only just a little bit older than them. But yet it shows there's so much contrast between her life and, say, Cutie's life.
Yeah.
And I think all that did was just really aid to a reader's understanding of what modern day Korea looks like, and the pressures that are, I mean, there's multi-generational pressures. I'm sure, you know, in Korean culture, there's probably pressures to make family, to be able to get married and that. But then you also see these 4 girls who have these pressures to look good, to be able to buy their own homes, to be able to live in the apartment blocks that they can't ever afford to live in.
Yeah. And I think that kind of like brings us to the men in the story. And again, I think that was quite an eye opener for me in terms of just how patriarchal and misogynistic this society is being portrayed as being. Obviously, it's the men who go to the room salons, and they're the ones who pay for the girls. I think there were one or two women that we saw tagging along with men.
Yeah, there were. There was that woman that walked into the room salon that nobody knew.
But largely, the girls are there to entertain the men. You have Wanna's husband, who Wanna chose to marry because he was the only one who didn't have a mother. So she didn't want an awful mother-in-law. So he didn't have an awful lot to recommend her at all. Then we have Miho's boyfriend, who is the son of the very, very wealthy, and his mother doesn't want a bar of Miho, because she is not suitable for her son, and he's not very nice either, quite frankly.
No.
So there are no positive male role models at all in this book, which again just reinforces how difficult it must be for young women without family backgrounds, without wealth, and without influence to make their way in the world.
Did you enjoy reading that the story? Like we touched on before, how the story was sort of spliced a little bit, and there was little almost episodic elements into the book. Did you enjoy reading that way?
To start with, I found it difficult to really engage.
Yeah, me too.
But then
I felt a bit confused. I felt like I was bouncing back and forth.
But then totally I worked out who the characters were, and I did enjoy it. But I have to say, there are certain elements of it that I sort of wanted more. Is having no particular beginning or end. I felt that things weren't resolved. Maybe
that's adding to, maybe, in a way, maybe that is what Frances was trying to create, is that, it's of that level of addiction, and that you wanted to know more because you didn't feel like you had to come to any sort of, any nice ending. It was more, and I feel like that's what these girls are living in. So maybe maybe the fact that the story was sort of episodic, and it was like elements that weren't quite resolved, and it was kind of jumping everywhere. Maybe that was sort of a metaphor for what their life actually is, and their hunger for more, really consumerist.
And also that you never know what the next day is going to bring, is that they don't particularly have an end point. It's not that they're on this journey and they're going to reach there and then everyone's going to live happily ever after. We don't know whether they succeed.
No.
And that kind of is what's attractive about it, but what's also I actually found quite sad about it. I mean, I didn't particularly finish reading the book on a positive note.
No.
That I didn't have
well, I just think with these women, like, I'm not against, plastic surgery or I'm in any shape or form. I don't have negative opinions about it. But the only thing that I kind of wonder is, well, to what point? Like, to what point do you stop? Eventually, do you just get old and then, or is it really going to be extremely detrimental to your health, which we can kind of see with Cutie? So it made me feel sorry for them and sad in a way, because I was like, when does it stop?
But that wasn't the plastic surgery per se.
No.
That was actually the lifestyle.
Yeah, I know. But you know what I mean. I just feel like, well, when do you stop? Like, it's just.
Well, I mean, I think there's two points to that. Is one, the amount of money that you've got.
Yeah.
And again, when I was doing a little bit of reading around it, there was an interview with a young girl whose father had given her plastic surgery as a graduation present from high school. Basically, his father had said, "Oh, you've got my eyes, so you probably should get those fixed. So I've made an appointment for you to go and see the surgeon. This girl said, oh, I was quite affronted by that and I didn't want the surgery, but because I quite liked my eyes. But afterwards, then she was really, really grateful. And she said, well, but why not get the surgery early? Because then you've got the rest of your life to be pretty. So, if you change your face early on, then that's going to be your face, and you've got whereas again, I kind of think that we've gone back onto plastic surgery, and I guess it's actually one of the
How can you not?
It's one of the
so
most
interesting.
is that in our society, then we tend to, unless there's sort of, something major, such as, someone's nose being a major problem.
As in broken or
sinusitis
or something along those lines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then, generally we tend to think of plastic surgery as something you come to later, rather than actually
rather than
rather than something that you create. As you go into adulthood, you create the way that you're going to look.
I guess it goes back to, perhaps this is a nice way to sort of round up the episode anyway, is it does go back to just understanding that, without passing any sort of judgment, because it is just such a different world, is that in Korean culture, the way you would look and your face really does determine your destiny. And I think another way that Frances plays nice tribute to that is with the scene with the fortune teller.
Yeah.
And so I actually did a bit of research on Frances, and Frances actually, as part of her writing process, went to a whole bunch of fortune tellers and was asking them in Korea asking them, if I had a face that looked like this, what would my future hold?
Yeah.
And sometimes she'd be asking for herself, and then sometimes she would be asking for her characters in her book.
Right.
And that, she said, apparently, depending on the face, all the fortune tellers sort of said the same thing. And it goes back to exactly what I just said, is that in Korean culture, your face and the way that you look does determine your destiny. So if anything that we can take out of this book is just another level of understanding of society and, different parts of the world have such different beauty standards.
Yeah, and again, when I was reading, someone else was saying that the world over, we look at inner beauty. That's been a massive trend, is to be beautiful on the inside. But in Korea, you also need to be beautiful on the outside, and that the two are actually seen as part of the same thing, that they're not separate. Is that the two go hand in hand. Which is a really different way of looking at it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I've learned a lot, and now I'm craving binge watching. There's actually, for any of you that want to do more research into K beauty, Korean beauty, there are many documentaries and short videos about exactly what we're talking about. And I would encourage you all just to have a watch and educate yourselves, learn a little bit more about their world. And I think, we can only be better people from being able to understand different societies and different cultures and, their different values, and to celebrate them in ways, even if they do seem foreign or somewhat dystopian to ours. So thank you everybody for voting for this book. Very
enjoyable and interesting
read. And I love it when we read a book when I feel like I have learnt something from it and taken something from it. So thank you all very much. So Mum has the lovely job of telling us what our next book is.
Okay.
Which is our first book for September.
So this is going to be our first book for September. So this book is called Kokomo, and it's by an Australian author called Victoria Hannan, who is currently living in Melbourne, I think, in lockdown.
If any of you listeners are in Melbourne, we both are. Our hearts are with you. You know, I just feel so sorry for you guys, and I cannot wait to have you all up and everywhere soon.
Back with us.
With us, yes.
Physically.
Yes.
Okay, so this book won the Victorian Premier's Literary Award for an unpublished manuscript a couple of years ago. So it's only recently been published to great acclaim. And it's the story of a young woman, Mina, who works for an advertising agency and was born in Melbourne. She's been overseas working in London quite successfully for about 10 years. And she gets a phone call from her best friend in Melbourne to say that her mother, that is Mina's mother, has left her house for the first time in 12 years. Mina gets on a plane and flies back to Melbourne and tries to unpickle what's been going on.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Again, we absolutely love that you read along with us. Keep sending us messages on Instagram and pictures of your reading with us because we love it. Awesome, guys. Well, happy reading, and we'll see you next time.
Happy reading. We hope you enjoyed watching this episode.
If you did, please leave us a comment below. We'll see you soon.